heartland of America and coast to coast. This is EM Student with Professor Dan Scott.
I'm going to paraphrase Dan Millman. A warrior does not give up what they love. They find the love in what they do. Good morning. My name is Dan Scott, and welcome to EM Student. Today is going to be a little different. We have a very special guest on. We're going to apply the topic towards the learning aspect of what we do in emergency management as a student, as a practitioner, as a professional. But today what we're going to do, and for the next few weeks, by the way, myself and Todd DeVoe are going to be working together in combining some of our show work that we do in the topic areas that we present. So today I'm joined by Todd DeVoe. Go ahead and bring Todd on. Good morning, Todd. Thanks for joining me.
Good morning, Dan. Thanks for having me back on the show again.
Yeah, so today, the guest today was your idea. He brought him to me, said this would be a great guest to have on the show to talk to students and professionals about the aspect of his book, his upcoming book. So I'm going to turn it over to you for the introduction.
Absolutely, Dan. That quote that you started off with today was fitting and fantastic because it's like, one of the ideas of the warrior spirit is that, never losing that drive. And this is what this is all about. So today we have Brent Gleeson on with us with his new book, Embrace the Suck. And I want to give you a little quick background on Embrace the Suck. That's one of the terms that we use a lot because, in the military, especially, Marine Corps Navy team, we're in what we call the suck, which is like normally either in the combat zone or in the stuff that's really terrible, and you can bitch about it or you can embrace it. And in this case, embracing it makes you do better and do better at your job. So Brent, welcome to the EM Student Show.
Thank you so much. Good to see you, brother. How you doing?
Welcome.
Good to see you too. So, Embrace the Suck. That is a perfect title for this book. I mean, I got to read through the advanced copy, and thank you for that. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff in here that I want to get into, but why Embrace the Suck? What made you write this one?
Well, admittedly, going into this project, as you know, a book is usually about a 2-year project cycle. Going into this, I didn't realize that 2020 would turn out to be what it has become. So selfishly, the timing of this book is wildly perfect, seeing as how we've been through a global pandemic, civil, social, and political unrest, financial and economic uncertainty, an election year. And so there's a lot of suffering and adversity that has gone on. And you really described the term Embrace the Suck perfectly. And the overall premise of the book is about, as we know in the military and a lot of us in other areas of our lives, it's about having a growth mindset as it relates to being intentional in the fine craft of comfort zone expansion and learning to use pain, suffering, and adversity as a pathway essentially towards insight, enlightenment, and developmental growth. Also learning how to better reassess our own personal values and associate those values with the decisions we make, avoid temptation, plan better, execute better, debrief with ourselves better so that we could be in a constant state of improvement, and doing all those things so that we can essentially live with the end in mind, manage those lists of life regrets so that we have a more fulfilling, purpose-driven life that's also aligned with giving to causes greater than ourselves.
So, the title is, the Embrace the Suck. That does encompass, the 2020. But looking through, how we apply that. But how does your book can address so a lot of even in the military and life really we have to deal with the unforeseen things that just pop up. COVID-19 was unforeseen. The shutdown of the country, the shutdown of the economy, the hardships, the people losing their jobs, people getting cut back, whatever it may be, schools shutting down, people having to not be able to travel. These are all things that were kind of put upon us. They weren't something that we chose for ourselves. So in the military itself, you have to adapt to situations that sometimes pop up and are unforeseen. So how can the concept in your book help someone, a leader, or just an everyday person, a student, embrace the unforeseen?
Sure. Most of us realize these days that preparation far exceeds planning. One of my favorite military quotes is, "No plan survives first contact with the enemy," or as Mike Tyson more eloquently put it, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And we can plan, we can have a whole slew of contingencies for what we're trying to accomplish personally, professionally, and whatever endeavors we're pursuing. But there will be obviously life ambushes that come along that you can't plan for. There are no contingencies for, and that you're definitely not expecting, regardless of how purposefully paranoid you really are. And so it really goes down to having a growth mindset, in the sense that when those life ambushes that could never be planned for, just like COVID-19, there is no backup plan, there's no contingency, understanding how to more quickly adapt to the situation. Take stock of your current environment, identify the resources you're going to need to get through it, clear and concise objective, what are the threats and blockages that stand in your way, and then developing an action plan and moving more quickly from sort of the causal thinking of the why me, why now, how are we going to navigate this, moving more quickly into action-oriented execution. So that's kind of two different mindsets. The fixed mindset stays in that environment. Now, there's nothing I can do about this. I might as well just throw my hands up and ride this out. Whereas the growth mindset individual, which is more along the lines of a high performance mindset or team or organization or leader, will take stock of the current situation and fight through that ambush more quickly.
So it's about adapting and moving forward. Yeah. Adapting, not getting stuck in the present, seeing that you're in a mess and you got to adapt and move forward or die at that point, right? It's right. Just still, you could potentially stop moving forward, stop growing. Instead, if you're not growing or learning, you're dying. As we apply it to the student aspect and to the learning aspect of things in the military. I mean, both you and Todd are both military veterans, so let me just say right away, thank you for your service, both of you. But you have a unique way of looking at things, because you were not just in the military, you were in one of the elite forces as a Navy SEAL. You trained and prepared and put yourself in terrible situations so that you could be prepared for, the hell week alone, right? You got to prepare and break your body down, your mind down, so that you can know that in a real situation you can work through that. So how can someone who hasn't been through that learn from that, the experiences that you've been through yourself? Well,
for some context to answering the question, I as you may know, I initially had no intention of joining the military. I was at college at Southern Methodist University in Dallas, graduated, took a job as a financial analyst of all things. And at that time, I actually had a close friend of mine at SMU who actually did have a lifelong passion and dream of joining the Navy and at least attempting to be accepted into the SEAL training pipeline. This was right before 9/11. So peacetime, so a little bit of a different mindset as far as it relates to the call to service. And we started training together, and I started learning about the history of the Naval Special Warfare community and reading books about our forefathers and the underwater demolition teams in World War II, how we cut our teeth as an elite assault force in Vietnam, and the conflicts from them to the present, and really became fascinated with the mindset, with the grit, the resilience, the mental fortitude, the attributes of high performance teams that associate with the entire special operations community and many other areas within the military itself, and our first responders, and the mentality it takes to do dirty, dangerous jobs, as they are sometimes. And what it came down to was really understanding that to pursue any extreme or wildly lofty goal in life, a goal that seems seemingly insurmountable, requires relentless preparation. It requires mindset transformation. It requires an emotional connection and passion to the achievement of that goal. And we've actually invested millions of dollars and years in research in the Naval Special Warfare community to identify the cognitive, emotional, physical, and mental attributes of students more likely to successfully navigate that training pipeline, because ideally we would like to grow the ranks of the SEAL teams, but we still graduate 10 or 15% per class. So for me, it was about focusing on what was in my control and really not worrying about what was out of my control. So it was about relentless physical preparation, which does have a connection to your mental fortitude. The further you push your body, you have to push your mind further. So we trained in Dallas, and my buddy and I moved to Crested Butte, Colorado, to train even harder for 10 to 12 hours a day at high altitude to prepare our bodies and our minds for the horrors that were coming. So what I would say to any person, student, professional, in your personal professional life, when it comes to achieving loftier goals, it's about doing the research, understanding the objectives that stand in your way, the resources you're going to need to accomplish that goal, and putting together a solid plan, and then violently executing that plan, possibly even bouncing those ideas off mentors who have been there, done that, and then just pushing forward. But it's really that passion and emotional connection that is required to push through the most arduous times.
So you talk about mental models in the book throughout it, actually, which I love that part of it. But before we get into that, I want to talk about the section that you put in regarding your mindset, and you write a little chart about the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset.
Yeah.
And is that something that somebody can change quickly just by applying this, or are people kind of put into that pigeonhole if they stay there?
It's well, the answer actually directly associates with where your mindset falls. Whereas a fixed mindset, we break it down into those categories of skills, challenges, effort, feedback, and setbacks. Now, a fixed mindset, the type of mentality where I am who I am, my skills are what I have, my strengths are what I have, my weaknesses are what I have. They cannot be developed. Challenges are seen as insurmountable. Whereas a growth mindset is quite the opposite of that, where you embrace challenges, as you see it, opportunities for development, for growth, for learning, for being in a constant state of improvement. You're never satisfied with the status quo. Your effort is essential to mastery and to development. Hard work and grit far exceed education. They far exceed genius and intellect. Like that great quote by Calvin Coolidge, former president, in there, that about persistence. Nothing in the world takes the place of persistence. Talent won't, genius won't. It really comes down to persistence and certitude. That's the big difference between success and failure, however you define those terms in reality. So.
Well, I'd like to bring it back real quick to, I mean, a lot of, and that's one of the reasons why, EM Weekly and EM Student exists, is to build a community, build places for people to reach out to others, to find those mentors, find those teams. And as you mentioned, it's a team, the SEAL team. When you go through when you had a team, you and your buddy, you worked together to push each other, to work to make each other the best you could be before you entered into that hell that you're about to go through. So that's an aspect too that it's important to understand, is that you sought out in your a partner, a team to be a part of. So how can the practice? I mean, you can do it yourself. I mean, you can. It's harder to do it yourself. So how can what and I, like I said, I haven't, Todd mentioned, I hadn't got to read the book, but in your book, how does it go to building a team, building the community to push yourself further?
Sure. And again, but like you said, as an individual, we can pursue certain goals in life, personally and professionally, but in a team setting, whether it's a one-person team, a two-person team, a massive organization, you go further faster in a team setting. With mentors, with bouncing ideas off each other, with a shared sense of purpose, with a large diversity of experience and attitude and intellect coming together to help navigate the inevitable obstacles you're going to face on the path towards whatever that goal might be. That's why I was in partnership with my college fraternity brother in pursuit of this goal. That's why my dad introduced me to his SMU swim teammate who became a SEAL during Vietnam. That guy became my mentor. And in that small circle, it allowed for a much larger degree of understanding about the path ahead. Just like in BUDS, in the first 6 months of the SEAL training pipeline, which is well over a year, what you typically see on TV or documentaries is BUDS. It's basic underwater demolition SEAL. And of that 6 months, the first 5 weeks are predominantly where they weed everybody out. So you arrive, let's say for simple math, with a class of 200. In those first couple of weeks, it's really an individual exercise. You're put in boat crews, 7-person teams, but it's really up to you to continue to push forward through those really arduous times in the first few weeks leading up to Hell Week. And it's really in Hell Week where you start to come together in these small team units in your boat crew. Now, granted, people are quitting right and left, so your boat crew gets, resorted and reorganized multiple times throughout each day. But you quickly transition from that individual competitive mindset to realizing that I'm not going to make it through this without leaning on the person to my left and right, and more so looking out for the person to my left and right. Because when we make it about other people on the team, but everybody on the team has that same mindset, you create this overlapping web of performance that, like I said, takes every individual in that team much further, much faster. And an interesting experiment that they do in Hell Week is The boat crews are predominantly, a lot of what we do in Hell Week is in competition with the other crews because they're trying to teach that winning culture, that winning team mindset, communication, collaboration, innovation, looking out for the person to your left and right, despite the adversity and the fear and the pain and misery. And some crews come together very quickly by doing all the things I just mentioned. And some fall apart because they lack leadership at every level in that small crew. There's no innovation, no collaboration, no communication. They're not in a constant state of improvement. They're not debriefing with themselves and saying, how can we do this better each time? How can we do it better? Instead, they're doing the opposite. They're infighting, they're finger pointing, they're blaming each other, they're arguing. And guess what? They lose every competition. So the instructors would actually swap this boat crew leader that's winning all the races out with this boat crew leader who's losing all the races, swap the crews and see what happens. What happens is actually fascinating and consistent across most classes. The crew that was losing under new inspirational leadership, a leader who knows how to bring the group back together, to stop the fighting, to break the silos down, to get them collaborating and working together as a team, almost instantaneously that crew goes to the middle or even towards the head of the pack in these races and competitions. Now, interestingly, even more fascinating is the crew that was winning all the races under new seemingly poor leadership, they actually continue to win all the races. Now, why would that be? It's because they had already developed such a concise and connective winning team culture and mindset, an emotional connection to what they're trying to accomplish, a shared sense of purpose that not one individual could break down what they'd already created. So it's a pretty fascinating look at the difference between individual accomplishment and team accomplishment.
That goes into my perfect transition because you said pain is
I knew it would. I knew it would.
Pain is a pathway, right? And whether it's physical pain or mental pain, even the college student has to, stay up until midnight and then wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock to get back to class. It's still some sort of pain, if you will. Well, why is pain a pathway to improvement?
Well, one of the things I did in sort of researching for this book was looking at the different cultural variables as it relates to how we view culturally pain, suffering, adversity. In Eastern cultures, in large part, and this is centuries old, they see pain and suffering as a pathway, a meandering pathway towards seeking enlightenment and seeking wisdom, whereas in the Western cultures, we typically try to seek pleasure and avoid pain at all costs. So we don't talk about it, we avoid it, we medicate it. And whereas when we can learn to find opportunity amidst the chaos, find insight within the suffering, then, and this is just not my opinion, this is based on behavioral science and psychology and research. For example, people have gone through the most arduous situations, prisoner of war camps, the Holocaust, extreme loss, overcoming cancer, whatever that might be. Those people almost always are happier, they're more fulfilled, they're more emotionally mature, and they're more connected to life in general, and they have a new perspective on everything. They see the world in a different lens. So there are ways not just to wait for life's ambushes to happen, but be more proactive in how we intentionally push the boundaries of our comfort zone, engage in what I call purposeful suffering, purposeful pain, in pursuit of things that are meaningful to us and to those around us. And when you do that consistently, kind of eating the elephant one bite at a time in small incremental changes, small incremental actions, then you are developing greater levels of grit, you're developing greater levels of resilience, you're expanding your comfort zone. And the more you do, the wider that area becomes. And then you set new goals, you set new boundaries, and you move the goalposts and you do it again. So you're in a constant state of developmental growth.
Yeah, that's a great analogy, because ultimately, in every leadership conference, every leadership book, every real growth motivational speech, they say get outside the comfort zone, make yourself uncomfortable, and that could be painful for some people. I mean, the living outside the comfort zone, that's where growth takes place. That's where you're uncomfortable. That's where you're constantly thinking, how do I get myself outside and make myself feel comfortable in this, right? And when you become comfortable, then you got to do it all over again and working through the pain. And it goes back to the title of your book, Don't Embrace the Suck. It says we have a comment. There's a fine line between hard and stupid. Yeah, I guess that there really is, but I guess it all depends on how you view that. So for what might seem hard to some people is easy, what might seem stupid to some people is not. So I guess that's all your perception, and that's a lot of what we do every day in just life, right? Is perception. It's how do we perceive what we're going into, and how do we adapt to it, evolve, and grow from it. But how do we grow others? How do we, as you said, it's about in your team, it's about looking out for the people to the left and right of you, to taking care of others. And to go, you, as a comment, I'd like to bring that back to your aspect of failure, not being afraid of failure, and the story you shared with me at the beginning. Simon Sinek says, you ultimately can't move forward and succeed and continue with consistency unless you are serving others. So I'd like to bring that to you. How do you relate your failure, and to be able to a story that you told me? I'll turn that over to you because I don't want to mess it up. But how you continue to learn, move forward, and get better in the service of others.
Well, it's really interesting because you can also equate this to service members who struggle with post-traumatic stress, injuries, or all of the above. One of the things we found that and this is outside of the realm of PTSD, which obviously isn't just connected to military service. It's anybody can get post-traumatic stress from a car crash to the death of a loved one. But what we found, and research shows, that volunteerism and giving back to causes greater than yourselves and making it about someone else, it takes a lot of your pain and anxiety away, because you're not sitting there dwelling on all of the adversity that you're that is causing you pain, stress, and anxiety, sleep deprivation, and things like that. But instead, getting out there and seeing who else out there possibly is in a similar situation, who's got it much worse than I do, because there is always a droves of people who have it much worse than you do, regardless of how extreme your situation is. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to failure, again, going back to the growth mindset, failure is good. Failure is a good thing. We don't seek out failure. You don't want to say, hey, I can't wait to take a face plant of this project, or I would love to get fired from my dream job so I can develop some emotional resilience. No, nobody ever says that shit. But at the same time, when we accept failure as a reality, an inevitable reality, let's pause there and define failure. Failure is when you stop moving forward. When you take those obstacles and you quit, and that's it. The path towards success, however we define it, is wrought with the pockmarks of micro failures, as I call them. They're just the setbacks, they're the obstacles where you course correct, you debrief, you learn, you apply those lessons learned to move forward. Don't make the same mistakes over and over. And when you continually do that, you're developing your own resilience. So one of the stories that we were just talking about was, I reference in the book, is when I was running my second company, I also found an interest in somewhat of a passion for public speaking. I had started speaking doing small things at trade shows and conferences related to the business that I was in. But I really found a passion for thinking about leadership and culture and high performance, as we can draw from the leadership and culture principles from the military and from special operations. How can we bring that into the business world or other civilian organizations? What can we learn from that? How can we apply it to higher levels of performance and desired outcomes? And my first ever speaking engagement was at the Inc. 500, 5,000 awards conference for the fastest growing businesses in the US, mine being one of them. And so I was given the opportunity to be a speaker at what they call the Veteranpreneur Day. It's the veteran entrepreneurs, which I was one of them. And large audience, about 300-400 people. I get there, I check in, and they find out, okay, you're going to be on stage with Simon Sinek. He's going to do his thing. You're going to do your thing. Then there's going to be a panel discussion with you too. I just went pale, because as an entrepreneur, I read all of his stuff. I followed him, all the articles in Entrepreneur Magazine, and watched his videos. And he has a real passion for the military, and he makes a lot of references in his talks to the military, like leaders eat last, and talking about giving to causes greater than yourself. And I had prepared some, but not to the level of what I prepare now for a keynote, which is relentless, regardless of how many times I've done it. And I got really nervous, to say the least. And so he did his thing. Of course, it was really good. Same speech he'd given a lot of times. I went up and did my thing, and it felt like it was okay. I fumbled a little bit, but I was like, that's pretty good. I thought it was pretty good. And Eric Schoenberg, the editor-in-chief of Inc. magazine, who was the MC of the program, thanked me, shook my hand. He was smiling, and we went on about the conference. And I called him the following week to debrief, get some feedback, just like a good military person, that we are. And admittedly, it was an opportunity to tee up more speaking engagements at other Inc. conferences as a business development sales opportunity. And I was like, well, what'd you think? How'd you think it went? Pretty good, right? And there was like this awkward pause. I was like, oh God. And he goes, well, Brent, it just wasn't good. It was like getting a donkey kick to the face. It's like it wasn't polished. You seem unprepared, and I just felt like it didn't work. And obviously, you know, when we get constructive criticism, we teach this in our leadership development courses. We have what we call the Sarah model. It's very similar to the stages of grief. You know, starting with surprise, anger, and then eventually acceptance, reflection, acceptance, and then help. And so I tried to go through that emotional process quickly, but it was eye-opening because I felt that I could find a passion and possibly even a career in part by doing speaking and thought leadership. And so from that point on, as the speaking part of my career developed and grew, I was relentless in my preparation process, rehearsing, doing the research, re-rehearsing, dirt diving the whole thing. And even now, you know, many, many years later, regardless of how many times I speak, whether it's on stage or now it's all virtual, I still follow the exact same relentless preparation process. And you see, you know, Olympic athletes do the same thing, great business entrepreneurs, philanthropists, actors, musicians, they all relentlessly prepare, regardless of how many years they've been doing their craft, how many times they've done the exact same thing they're about to do. And that is really a core tenet of high performance, of growth. I'm not calling myself a high performer, but I'm just saying it's at least an attempt to be a high performer.
Absolutely. I've learned more from my failures ever than from my successes, you know. You talk about high performance. I mean, take a look at the top athletes, like, like a Tom Brady and even Peyton Manning, those guys. I mean, they're always the first one in. They're spending all the time watching the films. You know, they don't just get on the field and rely on their athleticism, because everybody at that level is an athlete, right? So to be a top performer in that level, you have to do much more than that. There's a question that came in here. It says, any advice for developing a group of professionals to mature into a type of community that we're talking about? And I guess, Whit, you're talking about emergency management. What can we do to create a community of emergency management? That's a good question, actually.
Yeah, it's a great question, because it's exactly what my company does. So thank you for teeing that up. It really comes down to training and development. A lot of organizations say, well, we don't have time for that. We don't have budget for that. We don't have the resources to develop our team. We just got to execute on the task at hand of the job that's in front of us. But any high performing team or organization that seeks to be in a constant state of improvement has to also be in a constant state of development. For example, oftentimes there's a misconception that special operators are always downrange, taking the fight to the enemy. Whereas in actuality, we spend 75% of our time training relentlessly over and over and over again, then 25% of our time deployed. And when you're deployed downrange in a war zone, when you're not out operating, doing missions, or eating or sleeping, you're training, you're rehearsing, you're working on your body, on your mind. You're in that constant developmental state. And it's the same thing with any type of other organization where we need to develop a leadership mindset at every level. I'm talking about everybody in the team needs to think and behave like a leader, regardless of rank, title, tenure, or chain of command, so that you can decentralize decision-making, so that you can move more quickly on the battlefield. You can create greater levels of autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Those are the three elements of motivation theory that research shows that people really care about. If you want to get higher levels of performance out of an individual on a team, they have to be developed into finding resources for mastery, for purpose, so an emotional connection to the job they're doing, both individually and collectively as a team, and autonomy. And you can't have an autonomous decision-making framework within a team without a culture of accountability, without a framework for innovation and collaboration. But all these things, essentially, most of the time have to be taught. You have to design a culture that allows for those types of behavioral norms, and you have to do that through specific plans, specific frameworks, specific training modules. It doesn't typically just happen just organically. So it really requires constant training when it comes to leadership, organizational development, and designing a culture that achieves desired results.
Yeah. Brian Matthews makes another point here too, Brent, that talks about much of it in his, it's a little longer, but I'm going to pare it down a little bit, because his opinion, having a mindset that anticipates and having to make a dynamic shift and helps you with being agile and being able to make that change in direction. And you talk about this throughout your book. And what I love about the book as well is that you have the mental models for each section, right? And making that mental model, I think, is imperative of being a good, well, first of all, a good emergency manager, and then also an excellent leader. And and that being said, when you're developing the book and putting the mental models in there, what was your kind of like your mindset when you're putting this together?
Well, when I first started down the path of writing this book, as you know, my first book was about organizational transformation, leading through change, leadership, culture, more of a business book. But a lot of really great feedback from first responders, EMTs, firefighters as well, because the concepts relate to any organization. But then in all the years of doing leadership development, what we're essentially doing in enhancing leadership capability individually and collectively in an organization, it really starts with personal development, personal transformation, shifting your mindset towards the goals you're trying to achieve, leading by action and not just words, and learning how to your point earlier, how do we not just develop ourselves, but develop others. The best leaders are really good at not their specific trade or task or necessarily even their subject matter expertise, but they're good at coaching. They're good at mentoring. They're good at developing others and pulling out the strengths of those individuals, working on the weaknesses, and learning how to really motivate each person on the team. And most of the time, unfortunately, each person is motivated by slightly different things. So when it came to starting to write the drafts of this book, and I did research within the self-help or self-improvement genre, which is largely one of the largest, most popular genres of books and content out there, which I thought was a great opportunity, but I had never read a self-help book before. I was like, I don't need that crap. And so I started buying some books and reading through them. What I found, regardless of how popular the books were, was that I wasn't getting anything from them. There was no meat, there was no action, there were no tools, no models, no frameworks to actually use. They were fun reads, some of them were total garbage. Some of it was just a lot of fluff and happy self-talk and all that kind of thing. Whereas that's not how I think, and that's not the kind of content that I want to produce. So I wanted each chapter to have a framework that you can actually use, a tool, a model, something that you can refer back to, time and time again when you are faced with a certain situation. Oh, what was that planning model he put in the book? Let's go and make sure we use the exact framework. What was that model for avoiding temptation or the results pyramid? These different things that are in the book, so that the person has actionable takeaways, and then each chapter has the questions to ask yourself. So each chapter you can reflect on, the questions at the end of the chapter to make sure that it's reflective and you're learning and growing through the book. And although there's a progression in the Embrace the Suck model, each chapter can kind of also stand alone by itself.
Absolutely. And you brought up the temptation tiger taming, and I just love it. It's like, number one, clearly define your goals. Number two, visualize winning. Number three, list of obstacles. Number four, remove the roadblocks. And number five, my favorite one of them all, is you have to unfuck yourself. And I love it because it brings you back to the military and when they had to do that. Hey, Brent, so this book is just coming out, right?
Comes out next Tuesday, December 22nd.
And can you pre-order on Amazon and whatnot?
Absolutely, it's available currently on all retailers. I usually direct people to Amazon, but it's on Barnes and Noble and all the other ones.
So here you go, right here. It's called Embrace the Suck. You can tell as I'm reading it, I'm already flagging things on here to learn from. It's a super great book. So please, go down, buy the book. And it's Christmas time. Buy a couple of them. Buy one for yourself and give some out as gifts. And I don't think you'll go wrong with it. Brent, anything else before we let you go?
Well, I will say, Todd, that if not buying it for me and my content, the forward is done by one of my former teammates, Bud's classmates, and good friend, David Goggins. I guarantee you all of your viewers and listeners will know who he is, since he has about 3.5 million Instagram followers and worldwide recognized as an elite athlete and retired SEAL. So it's a nice gut punch of a kickoff to the book. So I think people will like that too.
Absolutely. All right, Brent, thank you so much for spending time with us. Daniel, thank you for inviting me to come back on and co-host again with you on your show.
No, thank you for bringing it, bringing Brent to my attention, and I think it's going to be a great benefit to the listeners, to the students, to the professionals. I think leadership, especially leadership reading and development, is one of the most underutilized um, qualities that anybody in any industry profession um, should that utilizes. They don't utilize it, and if they do, they don't take away actionable and
Yeah.
more than that, apply those things that are taken away. So this, I mean, I look forward to getting the book, reading it, and doing just that. I mean, it's so much theory, not enough practice, and I think we need to
Yep.
bring that. So, Brent, just I tell this to everybody. Giving me your time. Your time is the most valuable thing you can give anybody, and I truly appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for giving Todd and myself some today, and the listeners and the viewers today. I learned a lot. I appreciate being willing to come on and give us your time and talk about your book and talk about these concepts of leadership, development, and growth. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Dan. Thanks, Todd. It's an honor to be here. Good to see you guys, and hope this finds you all safe and well, and have a wonderful holiday season.
Yeah, embrace the suck.
Yeah, baby.
All right, thank you. So, just to sum up, and I appreciate taking the time. Appreciate Brent coming on. Thank you, Todd, for bringing the guest and bringing it to my attention. I think it was a wonderful addition to EM student. I'd like to just end up with saying this: victory is reserved for those who are willing to pay the price. Sun Tzu. If you're unwilling to pay the price, you're unwilling to do the work, you're unwilling to get out of that comfort zone, you're just staying still. If you're not growing, you're dying. This is Dan Scott. We'll talk to you soon.